Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into true crime cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of true crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
And I'm Megan.
And before we get started, Megan, let's do a little shout out today to a beautiful listener who wrote us such a wonderful message, Bailey. So shout out to Bailey.
Hi, Bailey. Congratulations.
She's graduating from nursing school this week, and she had requested a very specific case, which Megan is covering.
I am, just not today.
Just not today.
We just didn't want you to forget about you, Bailey, because we know you're graduating this week. Your present, your gift, your story, it is coming.
Yes, it is. So, hey, there you go. Congratulations. Thanks for writing us and for such kind words and for listening. So, good luck on your nursing future.
And I'm shaking the bones for you, Bailey.
Yeah,
we're giving you all the luck on your finals.
Shake our gree-gree, because she did request a NOLA case, didn't she?
She did, and I love me some NOLA cases.
Yes, exactly. So it's perfect that we're shaking our gree-gree. And let's let our listeners know we have a new gree-gree in the sack today.
I need to meet her. We haven't met personally yet.
Yep, let me get her out. It is a tiny crystal skull, and she is in the sack with the other crystal penises.
She's lovely.
Katie, who sent her to us, has affectionately named her the Queen of the Peen.
Of course. If she wasn't before, she is now.
She is now.
Because she's going in the sack here.
She's surrounded by six crystal
lovely.
penises, and I think she's going to have a lovely life in there, being fondled by us each recording.
That's
and
right.
Living amongst the other peens.
Right.
Or not the other.
All
the
of
peens.
them.
She owns them all. So
that's right. She's like the only female at the bar after hours.
Yes.
That's where she's going with us.
It's not a bad situation
Not at
if
all.
you're in the right bar anyway.
Exactly. And that sack is the right bar. That's the place to be.
It is. It's a
She's
safe
hanging
space.
out only with the classiest of dicks.
It's a safe
So
space.
it is.
Right. We have the fucking weirdest shit.
We
by
do.
The way. We're the best listeners.
So for those
Thank
of you
all.
tuning in who are new to the podcast, we can't even begin to explain ourselves to you. Other than that, at this point in time, we practice some type of voodoo before each story. We have accumulated good luck charms. I just like to think of it as the athletes that refuse to change their socks because they're lucky.
Yeah.
We just have our little gree-grees here.
Less stinky too.
I'm bringing you a story today.
I'm ready.
It's a little old-timey, and I know you've heard of it.
It's my best.
So I told you I went on this little kick where I was looking at like the most famous, unsolved, or most mysterious cases from each state.
Yeah.
And of course we covered Vermont, which was super fun with the Bennington Triangle. Tune into that episode. But this one is one from Kansas, and it is the case of the Bloody Benders.
Oh, you're bringing me the Bloody Benders?
I am.
I've only, through rabbit holes of other research, seen about it, but
Yeah.
I don't know specifics. So enlighten me today,
I'm going
friend.
to. So the Bloody Benders, and I'm going to start right off with this. They are what is believed to have been the first family of serial killers in the United States.
Holy shit. Like the whole family
Like
kills?
the whole family. The family that kills together.
Oh,
yeah, it's one of
okay.
those. So
No wonder why is their last name Bender?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is all making sense.
It's going to. Before I get into that, though, I'm going to give you a little history lesson. So I want to talk about the Homestead Act. Don't fall asleep, okay?
I did not see us starting here.
I know, but we are.
Okay.
So the Homestead Act of 1862 was signed into law by Abraham Lincoln.
Of course.
After the southern states ceded from the Union. Mm-hmm. It was a revolutionary concept for distributing public land in American history. Mm-hmm. So this law turned over vast amounts of the public domain to private citizens. So 270 million acres, or 10% of the area of the United States, was claimed and settled under this act. Mm-hmm. Repercussions of this monumental piece of legislation can be detected throughout America today. Of course, there are people that were displaced, and I'll get to that in a bit.
Of course.
An entire nation of people. Mm-hmm. The prime land across the country was homesteaded quickly. Successful homestead claims dropped sharply after the 1930s, and the Homestead Act remained in effect until 1976, with the last provisions for homesteading in Alaska until 1986. I had no idea it lasted that long. So people are
No.
still homesteading at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
So a homesteader, how one would come to be a homesteader and have this land is that you had to be the head of a household. So at this time,
A man. Okay.
I'm assuming in 1986 in Alaska, that was not the case.
Right.
But that head of household, we will use the word term, or at least 21 years of age to claim a 160 acre parcel of land. It wasn't as easy as it sounded, though, because settlers from all walks of life worked to meet the challenges of quote unquote proving up. So you had to improve the land after you got this 160 from the government.
Okay.
And
why is that not still a thing? By the way,
you
it
couldn't
should
just
be.
buy it and let it sit. You had to do something to prove it up.
Okay.
This was intended for farmers.
Yeah.
I mean, and if we think of Kansas as we see it today, this
Yes.
is like the heart of American farmlands,
Yep.
right? And this is why.
Yeah.
So settlers from all walks of life would work again to try to prove up this land, but they didn't have experience. So there's immigrants, farmers without lands of their own. There were single women and formerly enslaved people, all attempting to get land under their Homestead Act. A filing fee was the only money that was required, but sacrifice and hard work exacted a different price from the settlers.
Do you know, was the filing fee outrageous?
I don't believe that it was. And
Okay.
I should have found, I think filing fees were different depending on where you went, but they weren't.
Okay.
They
good,
didn't
because I could just see how
No.
it's like, oh, you only get land if you're rich.
No,
you know?
not at all.
That's
They
how it is
didn't-
today.
Correct. Yeah, no, it wasn't. In fact, the whole point was that by paying this filing fee, they at least had, something to lose if they didn't improve their land, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they had to do certain things. So each homesteader had to live on the land, build a home, make improvements, and farm to get the land.
Okay.
The patent they received represented the culmination of hard work and determination, and nearly 4 million homesteaders settled land across 30 states over 123 years. The Homestead Act of 1862 allowed anyone over 21 or the head of household to apply for free federal land with two single stipulations. They must be a citizen of the United States or legally declare their intent to become one. And they could not have fought against the United States or aided enemies of the United States.
Okay.
And this is post-Civil War.
Right.
Farming wasn't easy, though.
No.
You come from a family of farmers.
Yes. And it's still not easy.
And it's expensive.
Yes.
And it's still expensive.
Very much so.
A lot of these settlers had never farmed before, but they're intending to go get their land and farm.
Oh, shit.
They had
With no
money,
prior
Training,
farming. Okay.
tools, implements.
Oh, God.
And farming tools and implements, much as they are today, although mechanized, were expensive then. So you might be able to afford your filing fee, but when you go to settle your land out west, how are you going to afford all of the tools
Yes.
with which to farm?
How are you going to plow the land?
Right. And you're going to need your animals, your
Yep.
teams of horses or
Yes.
cattle to be able to
And
do this.
you need a way to feed all of those things as well.
Yes, they believe it or not, we have to feed the living creatures so that they
We
can
do.
continue to work for us.
Turns out.
Yeah. So the Osage Trail, which is later called the Santa Fe Trail, was originally called the Osage Trail by the Native American tribe that inhabited the area. As many Old West trails began, it was begun by natural migratory paths
Of course.
buffalo and other wildlife.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was something that was interesting.
Then
Just-
humans come along and fuck it up.
Right, as we still do. It extended from central Missouri near Franklin and Booneville, Missouri, westward, shadowing the route of the Missouri River, then turning southwestward toward Independence, Missouri, into Kansas, Colorado, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Old Mexico.
Okay.
So what we have now,
Right.
parts of Texas, I believe. I wanted to get through this and still mention, because I believe that tribute should be paid to the actual Osage tribe.
Yes.
So between the first treaty with the U.S. and 1825, the Osage ceded their traditional lands across what are now Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma in the treaties of 1818 and 1825. In exchange, they were to receive a reservation or reservation lands to the west and supplies to help them adapt to farming and a more settled culture. They were first relocated to a southeast Kansas reservation called the Osage Diminished Reserve. The city of Independence later developed there. The first Osage reservation was a 50 by 150 mile strip. During this period in Kansas, the tribe suffered from the widespread smallpox pandemic. of 1837 to 38, which caused devastating losses.
Yeah.
I know your face over here is just because we're reliving the worst parts of American history here. But
awful.
But it has to be kept in mind.
I know, but what we did to that. And you know what I'm thinking this whole time, the most ironic part of it is that we put into these man-made laws about how if you want to own this land, you have to be nurturing it, when we stole it from the people who were essentially living with it.
Who were hunting it and using it and nurturing it. Yeah.
Way better than we ever have.
And surviving.
Absolutely.
And surviving. But they wanted agriculture to boom.
Yeah.
And assist in feeding the rest of the United States because cities were starting to get big out east and heavily settled, even moving to the Midwest. So this is why we're westward expansion.
It is.
Money. The Osage were forced to move again to Indian territory in what became Oklahoma. So then you have the Civil War and Indian Wars. White squatters, we continued to be a frequent problem for the Osage, but they recovered.
We fucking still are.
Right.
God.
But they recovered from their population losses, regaining a total of 5,000 members by 1850. The Kansas-Nebraska Act resulted in numerous settlers arriving in Kansas. Both abolitionists and pro-slavery groups were represented among those trying to establish residency, which, as you can imagine, caused tension.
Sure.
In order to vote on whether the territory would have slavery.
Oh.
So the Osage lands became overrun with European American settlers, and in 1855, the Osage suffered another epidemic of smallpox because a generation had grown up without getting vaccinated.
Yeah. And we brought it.
We do. Yep. And continue to spread disease of some kind wherever we go.
Also still doing it.
Right. So, well, I mean, we know some of our friends.
We all are.
Right. Yeah. They should come with a prescription for penicillin.
Yes.
Subsequent U.S. treaties and laws through the 1860s further reduced the lands of the Osage in Kansas. And during the years of the Civil War, they were buffeted by both sides as they were both located between Union forts in the north and Confederate forces and allies to the south, caught between a literal rock and a hard place.
Yes.
So they tried to stay neutral. Both sides were being raided. Their territories were, horses were being taken, food stores were being taken. So then, and I'm almost done here, but following the Civil War and victory of the Union, the Drum Creek Treaty was passed by Congress on July 15th, 1870, and ratified by the Osage at a meeting in Montgomery County, Kansas on September 10th, 1870. It provided that the remainder of Osage land in Kansas be sold and the proceeds used to relocate the tribe to Indian territory in the Cherokee Outlet. By delaying agreement with removal, the Osage actually benefited by a change in administration. They sold their lands to the peace administration of President Ulysses S. Grant, for which they received more money, $1.25 an acre, rather than the 19 cents previously offered to them by the U.S.
That's great, but money had very little value for their culture.
Right. I mean, they were able to, set up territory, and
this is white man way of trying to like, it's fine. Here's money because we think it's super important.
Yeah, you made it out better than the other tribes have because we paid you a fair dollar market value.
Here
amount.
you go. We're like, we're going to kick you out of your mansion, give you more than it's worth, but we're going to make you settle in a trailer.
Correct. And you know what's interesting just about that amount? And I didn't put it in my notes, but I recall this possibly from even history class because I paid attention. If you didn't want to pay the filing fee and work to improve the land, you could simply just outright buy land out west, the 160 acres, at $1.25 an acre.
Oh, sure.
So they got paid
if you are rich
their
and you
fair
don't
market value was.
you don't want to actually tend to the land, you can do so. You can own some.
Mm-hmm. So, and as you can imagine,
but if you're poor, you better be getting to work.
Exactly.
Wow, not a lot has changed.
No, it hasn't.
For fuck's sake, we learn nothing from history.
But who are the people with the money, the $1.25 an acre to be able to pay for it? These aren't your farmers.
No.
But there aren't stipulations on it now because you aren't getting free land under the act. So this is why you have all of these cattle ranchers that have moved out there and you have lumber barons. And so that's why those things went west as well.
Yep.
So we have all these settlers heading west to homestead. Now we get into the good stuff.
Yeah, but I liked that history lesson. I think that it's a good refresher. And we have many listeners that are not from the United States. So now they know.
Now you understand what we did as a people here.
Yes. How
after we left Europe.
All are. Yeah.
or wherever we hailed from.
For sure.
I'm using Europe because that's where my ancestors came from.
A lot of them were.
So October of 1870. 5 families settled in the area in Kansas along the Osage Trail. The Bender family was one of these. They were thought to be German immigrants when they arrived in southeastern Kansas, traveling from Fort Scott to Cherryvale and Independence.
And those women are miserable in their corsets, and they are covered from chin to tip of toes.
I'll tell you that to start. So the family of the Benders, there's 4 adults that make up the family.
Okay.
But originally traveling in 1870 in October was just the 2 men.
Oh.
So John Bender Sr. and John Bender Jr. came to homestead their 160 acres apiece first. So they both were going to get their 160, by the way. Each of them had their claim.
Okay, sure. And they probably were going to help each other.
Yes. So John Bender Sr. was a stooped, broad, and short-limbed man who spoke little to no English and mostly communicated in grunts. So very guttural German, they believe, and he basically just grunted to communicate because he didn't have the English.
And his extremities are not very long.
No, but
he has nubs. Okay.
Yeah. So but listen to this. He's 60 years old, and most people start simply referring to him as Pa Bender.
Sure.
He stood over 6 feet tall and was described as a giant of a man. All I can picture now is a T-Rex.
For sure. He's just super tall with not
over
long arms.
6 feet with short limbs, and he's stooped and kind of, tall people hunch sometimes when they're insecure, or in his case, probably, hard worker.
And gravity really starts to take a toll.
Oh man, does it. I feel that every morning. He had piercing black eyes that were set under bushy brows, and some men referred to him as Old Beetle-Browed John. He had a ruddy complexion with a heavy beard that he kept. There are no reports of him shaving during any of his time on the homestead, and there's some speculation as to why later.
Oh, was that a common practice to shave? I guess I felt like everybody had facial hair back then.
I think they did, but they would be clean shaven at times. Not everybody had the beard, but he grew this beard that he kept on. I believe for facial recognition purposes.
Oh, worth noting anyway.
Yeah.
It left a mark on people.
So he always had a sullen expression and was, I like this quote, wild and woolly looking.
Oh, sure. Same. Okay.
So I've been there too.
In the morning, man. Yeah, that's exactly how you could.
Wild and woolly.
You could describe me.
My grandma used to say she woke up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yes.
I never got wild and woolly.
Nope. I've heard that one too.
John Bender Jr. was talkative. He spoke fluent, although heavily accented English. He was 25 years old, incredibly social, but he would laugh often, and his laughter was oddly placed and sometimes kind of maniacal. Like it just laughter for the sake of laughter, causing neighbors to believe there was something wrong with him, and they started referring to him as half-wit.
Oh,
right.
All right.
We weren't super politically correct.
Oh,
in the late
not.
1800s.
No,
John.
But I'm picturing it just beautifully.
Yeah, old Pa Bender and Halfwit are over there working on their land. John Jr. is described as tall, skinny, and handsome, with auburn hair and a mustache.
Oh.
So he didn't have the beard; he just had the
mustachio.
The mustachio.
All right.
And I think I've said once before, I'm a firm believer that very few men can pull off mustaches, but I mean, John Jr. was pulling it off.
Must be.
In the land office in Humboldt, John Sr. and John Jr. registered adjoining claims of 160 acres. Pa Bender's 160 acres faced the Osage Trail, and they were isolated enough that their nearest neighbor was 3/4 of a mile away. So Pa and Jr. on Pa's land build a one-room house. It measures 16 feet by 24. So what, like your living room?
Yep.
With a 9-foot ceiling. So like your living room.
Exactly like my living room. Yep.
They built a 7-foot square cellar below the home as well. The one-room home, so half of your living room, they separated using a wagon canvas. So the white canvas that would go over your wagon, they used it as a partition. They dug a well and even built a stable. And the women did arrive after they arrived in the winter of 1870, or it says possibly 71.
Okay.
They tilled the soil for gardens and planted an orchard. So culturally, they were known to have green thumbs, and people were excited about the prospect of orchards, peaches and apples, and all of those things growing as well.
So upping the land.
They're going to improve this.
All right.
Now, I want you to know, there was never any attempts at improvement on Junior's 160 acres.
Well, I noticed that you said that they built the house on pause.
Everything. The stable, they dug the well, everything was there. So I don't know if neighbors or whoever assumed that maybe they would get to theirs when the time came.
When they get to it.
But the only improvement ever made was on Pa's 160 acres.
How do you think they measured out 160 acres and determined territory back then? Like,
So
where was the survey?
How were surveys? I think that it was plotted out by foot. And rudimentary measuring, measuring strings, measuring tapes. They had those, but nothing certainly was anything like we have now in terms of accuracy.
What our country is built on. But I mean, it had to go off. It had to have evolved based on.
Well, and survey markers could be a tree, a rock, those type of things that were supposed to be immovable. And, you still see now in crops when you drive through here and your dad farms.
Yes.
Fence rows.
Random tree.
So the fence rows, we don't mean proverbial fences, but there is a row of something that's separating your fields to act as markers.
That's what made me wonder is, did they have something that they built or, planted or something to denote where their 160
I'm sure
was?
that there were cases where good fences make good neighbors, but this probably wasn't one of them because I don't think there was ever an intention to improve that other piece of property.
Okay.
So let me tell you about the ladies.
Yeah, I'm sure they were super stoked to arrive and be like, cool, 16 by 24.
Yeah, I think they were okay. But Ma Bender, I don't know that you would know because she's just a nasty person.
Oh.
She's not a nice lady at all.
All right.
So her name is Elmira.
Of course. Why does that just fit for some reason? I'm sorry if that's your name.
If you could have guessed a name, it would be Elmira.
I was picturing an Elmira.
What a name,
certainly. And they were probably like, oh, a chill just ran through my spine. I think the ladies are upon us.
Yes. And this is why. So Elmira is described as raw-boned with a heavy guttural accent, speaking almost no English, like none at all, similar to her husband.
Yeah.
She was 55 years of age, homely, heavy-set, with sinister eyes. She was so unfriendly that the neighbors called her she-devil.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I think my neighbors call me a lot of things, but I hope that's not one of them.
I don't think homely and she-devil are one of them, just so you know.
I mean, hot and she-devil I'll take.
Holy shit.
This was perpetuated by the fact that she always cooked over a large cauldron and once disclosed in some German rage that she was a medium and spoke to the dead.
Yeah, Elmira, you're not helping your cause here.
No.
And maybe she really was a medium. I won't discredit that.
But
the cauldron, do you need the cauldron, Elmira?
There's some credence to it. Well, she's cooking in the cauldron because, I'm going to get to why. I mean, she needed to cook a large amount of food.
Imagine traveling west with a fucking cauldron?
I think it'd be great.
God.
I'm going to stop at random campfire sites and get my cauldron out, strip down naked
children.
like a witch, throw a hat on. Right.
God.
We're making quarters tonight. So she said to rule the home with an iron hand, and all accounts say that Pon Jr. did whatever she demanded of them.
Yeah,
so
wouldn't you? She
wore
has a
the
cauldron.
pants. Yeah, she has a cauldron. She's wearing the pants.
He could probably fit in.
I don't know that that's a possibility, Charnell. You just gave me a whole different theory here. So the accounts of Ma Bender being some type of medium, though, they have more credence when we hear more about Kate.
Okay.
So Kate, the daughter, Kate is 23 years old, and she is the friendliest Bender. She is sunshine and joy.
Oh, this poor girl.
She is incredibly social, spoke perfect English with just the slightest accent. She was described as beautiful, quick to laugh, and friendly to strangers.
So these two trolls essentially produced beautiful children.
Yeah.
Because their son was handsome.
Handsome with the little auburn mustachio.
And then here's sweet Kate.
Who is just the loveliest little thing.
Huh.
She and her brother John were said to attend the Sunday school near Harmony Grove, and the community was very accepting of them.
Okay.
They fit right in.
Great.
Well, when the women arrived, they used half of the partitioned cabin to open a store and inn in 1871.
And inn?
An inn.
Where are you keeping the people?
Let me explain. So Kate hangs a sign that reads groceries above the door, and the Bender Inn opened for business. So there was a heavy table with benches by the makeshift partition. They served meals to the patrons. And then there were shelves with a small counter and items to purchase, like a little kind of grocery store. Mm-hmm. Ammo, canned goods, bolts of cloth, and other staple items that one might need while heading west. This is on the Osage Trail.
On the trail.
People are going to stop. So people would sleep at night. If there was just one or two, they'd feed them, they'd get their provisions, and then sleep on that side of the cabin.
Okay.
And then on the other side of the partition, back where the cook stove was and a couple of rudimentary beds, that's where the family would be. Yeah. So they're using this inn. And then, of course, they're able to take care of the travelers' horses, lodge them for the night in the stables that they built.
Right.
So
got themselves a nice little
They
biz going.
they do. And perhaps originally, ideally, they were going to make money so that they could improve the piece next door.
Right.
The next 160.
That we could throw them that bone.
So smartly, Kate was the acting storekeeper and waitress because she obviously has the best countenance, right? She was popular at the inn along the Osage Trail. People heading west would come across this place, and its location was ideal, as I indicated. Men described Kate as finely curved with an always smiling red mouth. Pervy.
Okay.
She would,
For sure.
I love male accounts describing female beauty from the 1870s.
Always smiling.
Finely
red mouth.
curved. Finely curved. Yeah, that's like catcalling in the
It is
80s.
for the in the 1800s.
It is.
That is catcalling for
Well,
sure.
Kate did not mind. She would gossip with the customers inside the house. Her brother John would tend to the customers' horses outside. Pa's out there as well doing manual labor. And Ma Bender, with her nasty little attitude, stayed in the rear of the apartment behind the partition with the stove and the family's beds. But she was said by Osage Township standards to be a very good cook. So people wanted to come eat.
That tracks.
Yep.
That tracks.
The Bender Inn became popular by word of mouth.
Okay.
Now, Kate probably had a lot to do with their popularity around town. Along with
She's
being
got
beautiful and
red
friendly
lips.
and having just a finely curved body and red lips, she was a self-proclaimed healer and psychic.
Awesome.
She gave lectures on spiritualism. and
Okay.
conducted seances.
Oh, I was with you until we went there.
Yes.
Okay.
We're talking spiritualism on its actual level of spiritualism.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking like some random form of Christianity. We're talking Christianity. We're talking real spiritualism.
I love spiritualism and I love learning about it. And I think we could all learn something from it.
She believes that she is a psychic, that she communicates with the dead, and she does seances for people, and she advertises these and giving lectures. And people want this.
So
they are
she's
coming to her for these things.
educating them.
She is.
Okay.
She handed out pamphlets about her skills that included supernatural powers and the ability to cure illnesses and disease.
Okay.
One of her handbills, those are pamphlets. I love the word
Right,
handbill.
a
We still,
handbill.
when you go to a play and you're being old fashioned, they will still often call them a playbill or a handbill.
Yes.
So one of the handbills read, Professor Miss Katie Bender.
Professor.
Well, she promoted herself. There's no
Wonderful.
documentation that she is a professor, but Professor Miss Katie Bender can heal all sorts of diseases, can cure blindness, fits, deafness, and all such diseases, also deaf and dumbness. Wish I could do that.
Oh,
And then
damn.
go so far, residents 14 miles east of Independence on the road from Independence to Osage Mission, 1.5 miles southeast of Nora Head Station.
That's where you can find her.
She wants people coming to that
Yeah.
inn so that she can give them readings, cure them of their dumbness and other such ailments.
Oh gosh, where is a modern day Katie? Because I've got some people to send to you. If you can really heal dumbness, I got some people.
I think that those people weren't healed because some
I'm
of them
guessing
didn't
not.
come back.
Oh.
So
sometimes people are just too far gone.
Yeah.
You just got to murder them instead.
the dumbness continued on
You know-
west
you know
or
what?
something.
You're not improving society, so I'm going to take it upon myself.
I think we've run along across a number of killers or serial killers over the years who follow that rule, right?
Yes, they justify
it was
that
a no
way.
big loss chalk up,
Right.
Which is not our theory, by the way,
No.
to anybody who might be upset or offended. I don't care how dumb you are.
No, me
Everyone
neither.
deserves to live.
I have a lot of darling dumb friends.
Oh.
That I wouldn't trade for the world. But
Gosh,
I'm not
no.
going to ask them for tips or advice.
No.
I just,
And also, I'm not going to tell them I can heal them by getting out my Ouija board and talking
also,
to the
I
dead.
will say modern day healers do not claim that they can heal ailments either. They just talk about symptom, helping the symptoms. They are very careful about.
We treat the symptoms.
Yes,
right.
we are not going. If you have stage 4 cancer, we are not curing that. But
No,
we
we're
can help
treating
the
it.
symptoms.
Well, this becomes very profitable for Katie.
Sure.
For Kate, I should say.
All of a sudden, a bunch of horny men are coming down with ailments.
Which she is not upset about because Kate loved being the center of attention and desired fame, wealth, and position.
Okay.
She advocated for free love.
Wow. She was
In her
fucking
time.
ahead of her time.
She was. She justified.
But that also goes with the healing and the mediumism. Mediumism,
It
though,
does.
is We're here to love.
Where she took the free love too far, and I think what maybe gained her some people who literally started to say that she was satanic were some of the statements that she made during her lectures or her small group audiences.
Okay.
So I think that the men and maybe some of the women there are just eating up this free love thing. I don't know if she was doing the lectures nude or not, but they're loving this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she says a couple things like, love is love, even with a brother.
Oh.
And she and John Jr. had been kind of cozy at times.
Sure. Well, it's lonely on the trail.
And people are beginning to believe that there's some type of a sexual relationship because she has zero boundaries when it comes to free love.
I'm sure there was. I do hope
you all know I'm meaning love in the carnal sense of the word.
Yes.
Okay.
Not just kindness to one another.
Not just loving thy neighbor as the Holy Bible was telling the other people in Independence, Missouri to do. So we have this conflict.
Yes.
She also once justified murder in one of her lectures.
Okay.
I think situationally, but justified it. And these things make people nervous.
These are problematic. Now we're getting into some uncomfies. I'm starting to feel uncomfy.
There's a fine line when you're trying to get people to join your cult.
Yes.
And some people are going to jump right in and the rest are going to be like, well, that made me feel funny and not in a good way.
Right. Yes.
I came here originally and Kate made me feel quivery and now she's making me feel shivery. And those are two different types of goosebumps.
They are. Yep. That you don't want happening.
No.
One you want, one you don't.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So between 1871 and 1873, travelers in that 2-year span, they start to go missing.
Uh-oh.
At first, a few travelers coming up missing didn't cause much concern because think about it. People just continue on their journey west.
Right.
So the people that are coming through, you're not coming to settle there. They're just stopping.
Yeah.
Disappearances, though, became more and more frequent. And by the spring of 1873, rumors abounded that travelers should avoid the trail.
Uh-oh.
Right? Like people are coming up missing along this section of the Osage Trail. You should avoid it. Towns are few and far from one another and communicating with the rural populations was sporadic at best.
Sure.
And remember,
probably took time.
Well, yeah. And remember, people aren't carrying around driver's licenses or other forms of identification. So you're not IDing people. You may not know who the people are traveling through. They literally used facial recognition. If this was the only way to identify people now, I look at somebody and I'll be like, I know who you are. I can't fucking figure out why I know you, how I know you. This is an occupational hazard for me, by the way.
Most definitely.
I know you. I just can't figure it out.
In a small town, definitely.
Towns, as I indicated, so the only way to communicate, as you just indicated, was to send somebody, right? Off on horseback and say, hey, we got a message from this town 3 towns over that said this person never got what they were supposed to. Have you seen them?
Have you seen this tall, burly man with short nubs and bushy eyebrows?
Exactly.
I mean, they had to use descriptors.
Yes, I did see him.
Right, like that. Like,
Spring of 1871.
Don't even get me started on doppelgangers.
Right.
I mean, then you're just fucked.
We all have them.
Yes.
We just don't know where they are. I want to find mine, though.
Apparently,
do you have one?
Back in folklore, if you saw your doppelganger, it was trouble. You're going to die.
I know, but
traditionally today, though,
and Stephen King would agree because he wrote a really great book series. I know you don't read.
I don't know, but I did know the
you
premise.
Don't read horror? You don't read the Stephen King?
I do not.
All right. Spring of 1871, Labette County. This is the county that they're in. And the stretch of the Osage Trail near the Bender Inn started having an inordinate number of missing person reports. So now they're finding that it's just in this specific area. So here's a few things that happened that are concerning. In May of 1871, they found the body of a man by the name of Jones, discovered in Drum Creek. His head had been bashed in by a hard object and his throat had been cut.
Ugh.
Of course, the person who owned that piece of land where the body was found was the person of interest for quite a while, but there was never any evidence or proof to proceed.
Sure.
There's just a body found in his river.
Being like, I'm sorry, I own 160 acres. And
this is along the trail and he was just off of it and in the creek. In February of 1872, so 9 months later, there was a blizzard in southeastern Kansas. After the snow melted, there were 2 bodies in Drum Creek. They had not died from the blizzard because blizzards don't bash people's heads in and cut their throats.
Unless it's Dyatlov Pass.
Well, there you go. That's a whole different story.
It is. See an earlier episode.
It's right. Because the area was well known to have horse thieves and other common prairie crimes.
Sure, this is the Wild West, people.
Right?
Yeah.
And there are still indigenous people Although I do want to point out that for the most part, they were peaceful and we were assholes. So I'm just going to throw that there.
Yes.
There's little law enforcement.
Right.
And there were also, because there was little law enforcement, kind of vigilante style committees.
Yeah.
Right? Vigilante justice was big. You'd grab your group of people and go and get the justice.
Yes.
So these vigilante groups did arrest some people, but they were all released by actual authorities who know how to investigate.
Citizens arrests.
Well, and some innocent men were even run off because, as you can imagine, armed farmers on horseback dragging you off in the night wasn't comforting. I think a lot of people, those people that were ran off were like, not it. This is not worth this to me. We're going back east, right?
Right.
In the winter of 1872, George Newton Lanker was traveling from Independence, Kansas to settle in Iowa. He purchased a team of horses and a wagon and was traveling with his infant daughter, Mary Ann. George had lost his wife. She had died, I think, about 6 to 9 months before, and they were moving to Iowa to stay with relatives. I believe his parents, it indicates specifically Mary Ann's grandparents, which is just cute. So little Mary Ann's grandparents became worried when they never arrived.
Sure.
Obviously, these weren't two people or a man and his young daughter just traveling west without going to someone. So they were actually able to send word back. A game of telephone from town to town and said word back to Kansas that George and Mary Ann had never made it. Now, others disappeared around the same time. Fall of 1872, so just before Mr. Longcore, or George, and Mary Ann disappeared, a Johnny Boyle left from Osage Mission on foot. He was traveling with about $1,900. This is $35,000 today. Intending to purchase land. So he was going to go do the thing and purchase it outright.
Yeah, he was going to do the 125 acre. Okay.
But he never returned and he never purchased any land. Henry Mackenzie, a 29-year-old Civil War veteran, had also walked from Indiana to Kansas, but he went to visit his sister in Independence. He was described to have been very fancily dressed in a chinchilla coat.
Chinchilla?
I want one.
Oh my gosh.
I would never kill them though. I'll wear it live.
Yes, for sure. I don't know.
Hold each other's tails.
Megan, I was picturing it alive. The whole time when you said I want one, I knew exactly what you meant.
Oh yeah. A live chinchilla coat. I am a walking weapon. But Henry here, he only carried 40 cents. He wasn't well off. He was a Civil War vet.
He just wasn't
Honestly,
well off.
I bet he borrowed this coat because it was cold.
Right.
He wore the chinchilla coat to go walk to visit his sister from Indiana to Kansas.
Holy shit.
Amen.
I don't know. I mean, I love my sister and brother, but I don't know that I'm walking halfway across the country just
I
for
love
a
my
visit.
sister, and she lives 5 miles from me. And I'm not going to walk in the winter to go see her either.
No. Love you so much.
Love you so much. Miss you.
Yep.
Henry Mackenzie disappears. Ben Brown, another lone traveler who drove a pair of sorrel horses. That was he not well off, wasn't carrying a bunch of money, but he drove a pair of sorrel horses. Okay. Disappeared along the Osage Trail with no explanation. Then we have William McCrotty, who lived near Osage Mission also. He left to purchase land similarly to Johnny Boyle. He's carrying $2,600 with him, so well over $40,000.
Yeah.
Also to purchase land, never returned, never purchased any land. So we're setting up some issues, some concerns here.
I'd say.
Now, Mr. Longcore, I'm just going to call him George, that disappeared with his little daughter. This solidified that something terrible was happening. All of these people have gone missing. Then you have a man and his little girl missing.
Infant daughter. Mm-hmm.
And there was somebody to miss him. Like he didn't show up where he was supposed to. There was an end game there. Mm-hmm. Too many mysterious disappearances to call a coincidence at this point. The person George had purchased the horses and wagon from was a neighbor from Independence, a Dr. William Henry York. I just love neighbors in the 1800s.
That's a wonderful name. Dr. William Henry York.
Dr. William Henry York, who is a great human being, realizes his neighbors are missing, whom he sold the horses and wagon to, and he's concerned. He goes and looks for them.
Really?
He heard that there had been horses in a wagon abandoned near Fort Scott, and it was reported that the horses were nearly starved to death.
Oh.
So Dr. York goes, he identifies the horses and IDs the wagon as the ones that he sold.
As his own, okay.
And they contained, by his identification, the wagon, the clothing of George and little Mary Ann.
Oh, okay.
So Dr. York knows something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He heads out after he identifies at Fort Scott these horses, and he disappears.
Oh, no.
He had been described as riding a valuable horse, and was carrying around $700 to $900, which is probably normal for he's a doctor during the time. Dr. York may have been, they believe, looking for clues as to George and Mary Ann's disappearances when he himself became a victim.
Man eating rocks.
Yeah. See a prior episode. Well, as we know, and you've stated before at the beginning of this episode even, money and power can make things happen. Mm-hmm. And when someone important goes missing, we have seen justice move faster.
Right.
In these cases.
Like a doctor.
Like a doctor. And when a doctor goes missing, I think your townspeople worry. But even more so in his case were his two brothers. The Ed York, who lived in Fort Scott, and Colonel Alexander M. York, a Civil War veteran, lawyer, and Kansas State Senator from Independence.
Okay. Yep, that's important.
Dr. York disappeared, and Colonel York wasn't happy.
Nope, I bet not.
The wrong person disappeared.
Where's my bro?
Where's my brother? Mm-hmm. Who went looking for a lovely young man whose wife died, and he was with his infant child.
Yep.
There is attention finally being brought to people coming up missing. Mm-hmm. Both the Colonel and Ed, brother Ed, knew what Dr. York's travel plans were, and when he didn't return, they put on an all-out search. Colonel York led 50-some men, questioning every traveler along the Osage Trail and stopping at every homestead. March 28th, 1873, the search party arrives at the Bender Inn.
No, does it?
The Benders admitted that Dr. York had stayed with them.
Okay.
Mrs. Bender is extremely grumpy. Junior is quick with Bible quotations because that will make the situation better.
Yes, we are people of God.
Yes.
So we're innocent.
And they suggested that Dr. York may have had a run-in with some Indians.
Oh, sure.
So
blame the people we stole the land from.
Colonel
asshole.
York is like, oh, okay, yep, maybe that happened, and has dinner there before leaving, but he's not alone. So he's not unaccompanied. Mm-hmm. So uneventfully leaves, but he doesn't like how he's feeling. Okay.
Yeah, I bet not. I bet the juju in that place is feeling real dark.
Bad juju. And after he leaves the Benders, he keeps feeling this unease, and he keeps asking questions. So the Colonel runs across this woman, and she says she had fled from the Benders Inn because Elvira, Ma, had threatened her with a knife. So the Colonel returns, and he confronts the Benders. Elvira didn't understand any English.
All of a sudden.
While Pa, no, she hadn't, she was just grumpy and pretended she didn't understand English most of the time at that point. While Pa, Junior, and Katie denied this confrontation had even occurred. But Colonel York is persistent in his interrogations, and eventually Ma, Elvira, she flips out. And all of a sudden, speaking in accented, although perfect English, orders them to leave her home and screams that woman was a witch and had cursed her coffee.
Cursed her coffee.
Listen, you cursed my coffee. We're having words.
Oh, yeah. I would not be
also,
okay with
I'm
that
still drinking
either.
it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'm just not happy about the fact that now I'm going to grow hair probably on my upper lip.
I will drink your curse, raise you one voodoo charm, and grow a beard.
Yes, exactly.
Fine with it.
Live the rest of my life hairy.
Yeah. So, Elvira's English had vastly improved.
Yeah.
Or Elmira, I should
say. So now they're like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the Colonel's like, something's off.
Are you picturing a wart with hair on it in her face?
I am.
Because that's just how I see her.
I am. Like the witch in Sleeping Beauty.
Yes, that's exactly.
When the Colonel goes to leave, young Kate asks him to come back alone.
Does he?
And that she would talk to the spirits and help him find his brother. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I wonder how many times this worked.
I was just going to say, and now we know how she did this.
Kate, doll, you're talking to a colonel in the armed forces, just off the Civil War, had served in the United States Senate, or
even was lots of death. Lots of death.
This isn't going to work on him.
No.
So the Colonel leaves with his men firmly convinced that the Benders are involved. Some of his men were also so convinced they wanted to hang them on sight, because that's how we do justice in the West.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Colonel, being a law-abiding man, he wanted the evidence. Someone or someones in Osage County was responsible for these missing people, and he was going to find them. Well, what do we do when something bad's happening in our community in the late 1800s?
Panic.
But we panic often together.
Yes.
And those are called town meetings.
Town meetings.
We still panic together.
Do we get our pitchforks and torches?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
we get our pitchforks, we get our horses, and we meet at Harmony Grove Schoolhouse.
Of course.
Because that's where all great ideas begin.
The men and boys, the women and children have to stay behind.
In fact, that is true because there were 75 citizens in attendance, including John Bender Sr. and Jr.
Oh,
I mean, the whole town is very worried, Charnell.
It's a town meeting. They've got to
They went. And they listened to all this evidence. I didn't put it down here, but there are some scripts which I could have been highly falsified. So if you find the Yorks on Find a Grave, you know, we love you and I love Find a Grave. Someone had taken to basically writing a little bit of a script out. I'm not going to read the script, but we could have done a dramatic reenactment. It could be fun.
I wish we should. We should.
And somebody says at one point in time, well, I think it was whoever the Benders' neighbors were, and they say no, it was obviously the Benders. And John Bender's like, I'm insulted. It was not us, you know. So all of this yelling and talking is going back and forth. They know it's someone in the community, and after listening to all the evidence, they decide that a warrant would be obtained to search every single homestead in that area.
Kill the beast,
but kill them legally. They got a search warrant.
They did.
They're going to get a warrant to go through
I love the way you segue to my random ass comments.
Kill the beast.
Kill them legally.
Right. And with by beast, we mean legally executed search warrant.
Yes.
So 3 days after the town meeting, a Billy toll is passing by the Benders.
So the Benders now know that every house is going to be searched, so they have time to get rid of evidence.
Well, not just that. When Billy Toll passes the Benders, the inn, 3 days later, it is completely deserted.
Oh, imagine that.
The animals appeared to be starving.
Oh,
there was no one
assholes.
around. He reported this, by the way, 3 days after, which is when he immediately. So 3 days after the town meeting.
Right.
But we're in Kansas, in Toto. Bad things happen when we in Kansas. It's called weather.
Yeah.
There was really bad weather that kept people from leaving their homes. I don't know if it was tornado weather at this point.
Probably. It's fucking Kansas and it's flat as shit.
Exactly.
It's terrifying there.
They are able to investigate.
I got PTSD from some travels.
Right? Alabama, for me, when I was driving up from Florida last year, Alabama, there was some terrible tornadoes coming through. So anyway, the weather keeps people from getting out here to the Benders to investigate. Days more pass before a search party goes to the Benders. I believe what I read was that there were 10 days in total from the time they had the town hall meeting to the time a party got to the Benders to search.
Okay.
Now, legitimately, it could have taken that long anyway, because warrants to search all the homesteads along the area was going to take some time.
Of course.
So I'm not saying they weren't actually searching places, but the first place I would have gone, the first place Colonel York wanted to go, was the Benders. So Colonel York is part of the party. Of course he is, right?
Yes.
Thank God we have a smart man here.
He has made himself a part of the town now.
For the time being. When the party arrives at the Benders, the cabin was empty except for some random items strewn about. 3 hammers, a knife, a clock, and a German Bible. Okay. This is the German Bible that Junior would quote things from all the time.
Sure.
And there were some random weirdness things written in there. Nothing inculpatory, but still some things written. The livestock, they were either dead or starving or close to it. I hate when people leave their freaking animals.
Me too.
Take them with you. I guess you can really take your livestock when you're on the run from the law. I assumed that killers and murderers are good animal caretakers.
I don't know. Right, exactly. They hate people, but you know.
I will continue. Leroy Dick, the township's officer, and the rest of the party describe a bad odor in the cabin and found the smell to be coming from the cellar.
From that little cellar that they built.
So let me tell you about the little cellar.
Oh, no.
Well, there was also a trap door from the cabin into the cellar.
On the inside of the cabin?
On the inside of the cabin. And it just so happened to be under the chair at the table close to the partition.
Where all the guests sat.
Are you getting a Sweeney Todd vibe?
I am. This is terrifying. And also, that means they had this intention from the moment that they built that place.
You got it.
Holy fuck. This wasn't just like the women showed up and were like, you know what? We're bored. Let's start murdering people.
No.
This was intentional the entire time.
Yes, when they moved there. That is what is thought in modern tales extending from there. And this is ongoing.
Yikes.
So the trapdoor they did nail it shut before they left. It's not hard to pry open. So they pried open, and they had laid a limestone slab down there, not like poured concrete like us, but like literally laid a slab. There was blood, clotted blood, all over the small room on the limestone and around it. Well, they take sledgehammers to the floor, to the limestone, and after breaking through the stone, they found that the blood had actually soaked into the dirt, and that's what was causing that odor, just that death odor, all this clotted blood. But there were no bodies or other evidence of remains, just the blood. So
fuck, she Leonardo'd their ass. She cooked them in that cauldron.
Let me tell you that there is one rumor of cannibalism. I could not find anything to back that up, but I'll give it to you because you brought it up. The whole cauldron thing, people did talk. There were rumors that the people that had come up missing that weren't able to be found, they perhaps speculated that something had happened, that they were cannibals, or that they were serving them.
Or just, or just cooked down, rendered down.
Correct.
And to get rid of.
I don't know if they were selling soap or candles or anything like that, like Leonardo.
I bet they were.
But no proof of any of that.
Okay.
So.
But how would they prove it then anyway, without an admission?
Right.
Leonardo admitted.
Yes.
And left her recipe of book.
I know,
cookbook.
she sure did. That you don't
Still
get that
don't
here.
hate her, but okay.
So searchers began to probe the ground using a long metal rod. I mean, this is typical, right?
Yes.
I mean, they use those long rods.
We actually still kind of have a sense of that today.
We do. Mm-hmm. So all around the cabin, they're using this long metal rod. They're not finding anything. Then they notice a rectangular depression in some kind of hard soil over near the garden, and also some spots in the orchard. They notice some disturbed soil. So there, where the rectangular depression was, where that kind of hard soil was, they started digging. And this is where they found and identified the body of Dr. William York.
Oh, Dr. York.
So he's presumably the last one to come up missing.
Yeah.
Because after that, people were on their trail. They killed the wrong guy.
Yeah, yeah.
He had been, so his head was bashed, okay? It was hit, blunt force trauma, and his throat was cut.
Okay, just
Same
like the other people
MO.
that were found. Mm-hmm.
He had been buried face down with his feet barely below the surface.
Oh.
Very deep. He was buried like head face down.
Oh, where his...
Kind of at an angle.
Like he dove into the earth.
Okay, not quite a dive, but enough so that his feet were barely under the earth and he was pushed face down.
I'm picturing it. I got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was just odd.
That's weird. Yeah.
They probed the ground and dug until midnight and marked 9 possible grave sites.
Did they do that to save space? Because they were planning on having a lot of victims to bury?
I don't know. They've got 160 acres.
Yeah.
The next morning, so they marked the spots. They dug until midnight. Okay. So they have to come back in daylight because this is 1980 something or 1880 something.
Right.
Fuck me, man. Okay, I'm sorry.
This is 1980.
Shush. So they start digging in the 9 possible grave sites, and they find the corpses of one unidentified man and an unidentified woman, a John Greery, a Henry Mackenzie, W.F. McCrotty, Ben Brown, and George Lonker and his little daughter.
Oh, okay. Now I'm pissed.
I know. Okay, so here's a trigger alert. Even though it's old-timey, this might bother people. The body of little Mary Ann was found with no injuries that would have caused death.
No. All
the others had blunt force trauma to the head and slashed throats. The girl had been buried at her father's feet and appeared to have been buried alive.
Yeah, I knew that's where you were going.
I'm sorry.
These fuckers.
Yeah. So these women, they couldn't kill the child, but so they buried her alive.
So that's where their moral compass lies.
I think that is.
But we're still going to kill her.
Yeah.
We just can't be the ones to do it physically before. But what? I can't even wrap my mind around that.
So
that's more inhumane.
I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but I literally was like, oh my God, this is where this comes from. The burial site, the largest known mass grave site at that time, was christened Hell's Half Acre.
Oh, no shit.
You've heard it before.
I have.
In fact, I feel like my grandpa'd be like, head on over to Hell's Half Acre, right?
Yes, exactly.
This is where it's coined. How it's christened Hell's Half Acre.
Oh my God, I never.
A half acre of that 160 was a grave site for the Bloody Benders victims.
Wow.
Yep. Colonel York offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to the Benders' arrest. When word of the Benders spread, the murders, thousands came, including reporters.
Oh, yeah.
And even, sadly, souvenir hunters.
Oh, my gosh.
Who ripped the cabin apart, even taking the bricks lining the cellar.
Man, humans still do shit like that
Yes.
today. So that's interesting.
But it's been happening since the beginning of time. Yeah. Grave robbers in ancient Egypt. And so people want their souvenirs.
Wow.
We are morbid. If we weren't, you wouldn't be listening to us.
That's true.
Pieces are coming together, though. There's investigation, talking, really communicating now.
We've
as
got
best
a
as we
colonel
can.
on the job. I mean, yeah.
Well, visitors, here's what they've pieced together. Visitors would stop for a meal, and then they would be seated at the table, positioned with their backs to the white canvas partition. Kate would charm the men, flirt, or even talk about her psychic gifts, giving a lecture perhaps if they had come to listen. Then Pa and John Bender, hiding behind the canvas, would hit the man or men in the head with a hammer. Ma and Kate would take any valuables, slit the man's throat, and push them through the trapdoor into the cellar. Once it was safe to move the bodies, they would bury them under the cover of night in the garden behind the house.
When it was safe, you mean dark?
Yes, under the cover of night. Because I was thinking to myself at first, God, that's a lot of work to drop a body down in a cellar just to have to carry them out. But they were taking them as they came.
They don't know who's going to stop.
Look, they could have come during the day.
Yeah.
In the early, they're eating dinner, and someone could stop. Yeah, so they need to dispose pretty quickly of the bodies.
Yep.
Now, even though they're taking valuables, they didn't know if they were going to get valuables.
No.
They were killing for the thrill of it.
They were.
This was a
Absolutely.
plan. This was a routine.
Yep.
Although the Benders...
hopefully they had some extra cash on them.
Well,
as most travelers.
And here's what we've got. Although the Benders may have robbed their victims of about, total of all these victims, $4,600. Now, this is a lot of money then. I mean, we're probably... That's
what about the people
$80,000
that had
now?
like... Oh, okay. Wait, got ya. Thank you. I was like, wait, 4,000. You mean 4,000 their time?
Yes,
not our time.
4,600 their time.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Two teams of horses and wagons. That's kind of what they believe was obtained from all of these victims. It has been widely thought that the Benders literally killed for the bloody thrill of it, and they began to be coined the Bloody Benders at this point.
Oh, I think absolutely that's accurate.
So stories that assisted in piecing this information together included a failed execution of a William Pickering. Pickering had visited the inn and refused to sit near the wagon cloth because he saw what he believed to be bloodstains on it. It was white. Lovely, sweet Kate, at this point, is mad that he won't sit there, and she threatens him with a knife, and he flees.
Oh, my God.
She lost her shit. She wasn't getting her way.
No.
A Catholic priest visiting proclaimed to have seen one of the Bender men concealing a large hammer, which made him really uncomfortable, and so he left.
Definitely.
Two men also reported visiting the inn to experience Kate's psychic powers. I'm sure that's why they went to visit Kate.
Yes, they wanted to talk to their dead grandma. They didn't want to stare at her luscious curve.
Or have her give the free love lecture.
Yes.
Which I believe came with a souvenir breast.
I imagine it
not
probably did.
Well, they stayed for dinner.
I'm sure they were titnotized the whole time.
So they stay for dinner. When they refused to sit at the table because they chose to take their meal at that small counter, Kate also lost her temper with them, and the two Bender men emerged from behind the cloth. Lucky for them, the two men, they leave immediately. They're nervous because nice, sweet Kate just yelled at them, and Pa and John came out from behind.
Something feels wrong.
Right, and they left. There were also more than a dozen bullet holes in the roof and sides of the cabin. And the media of the time, newspaper. The newsies. They assumed some of the armed victims may have tried to fight after being hit but stunned with the hammer.
Sure.
I'm sure some people died from the blow of the hammer, but they always slit the throats, by the way.
Right. Okay, so they probably weren't. I mean, at least, like you said, they were probably stunned or just knocked out.
Yes.
But
So the search for the Benders began, and in addition to Colonel York's $1,000 that he offered, Kansas Governor Thomas A. Osborne offered $500 each Bender, or $2,000 total for the Benders.
Wow.
So this led to some false arrests.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Oh, an ugly hag woman? I know her.
Yeah, it led to some false arrests.
All right.
A ticket clerk in Thayer offered information. So detectives had followed wagon tracks and discovered the Bender's wagon abandoned with starving horses just outside.
Fuckers.
I know, just outside the Thayer city limits, only 12 miles north of the inn. The ticket clerk at the train station said he sold 4 tickets to people matching their descriptions.
Okay.
They had bought 4 tickets on the Leavenworth, Lawrence, and Galveston Railroad for Humboldt. John Jr. and Kate were alleged to have left the train at Chanute and caught a train south near Denison, Texas. They were rumored to have gone to a rogue border region with no law enforcement, where outlaws gathered between Texas and New Mexico. And they weren't pursued because lawmen who pursued that to that area didn't return from that region.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, one detective...
So they split up.
Yeah. So John Jr. and Katie... One detective says that he did trace them to the border, and he reports that John Jr., when he was down in, what do we want to call it, outlaw territory, died of apoplexy, which is a stroke.
Okay.
So this comes up a couple times.
Kind of young to stroke out, but
he
is the 1800s.
He is. Nobody said whether or not the stroke was accompanied by a hammer-shaped indent to his head or anything, but they do say a stroke.
Good point.
Ma and Pa Bender never got off the train at Humboldt. They continued north to Kansas City and were believed to have transferred to a train heading to St. Louis, which happens to be still the murder capital of the United States. I love you, St. Louis. Vigilante groups formed to search, and many of these groups make claims. So I'm just going to go through all the theories now. One group says they shot down the men and Ma and burned Kate alive like the witch that she was.
Okay.
Another group says they caught all 4 of them while escaping south and lynched them, then threw them in the Verdigris River.
But they really are just trying to get this money, right?
Listen.
Okay.
And another group says that all 4 Benders were killed in a gunfight and they buried them on the prairie. But there were never any confirmations, bodies found, and no one ever even tried to claim the $3,000 award, which was $67,858 as of today's date. The search continued on and off for over 50 years. Rumors that Ma and Kate actually traveled together were also reported. So there were reports that it was Ma and Kate together. In 1884, there was a report that a John Flickinger, thought to be John Bender Sr., Pa, committed suicide in Lake Michigan.
Okay.
Then, that same year, another man was arrested in Montana for a murder in Salmon, Idaho, where the victim was hit in the head with a hammer. They sent to Cherryvale to get someone to come ID the suspect. They believed it to be John Bender Sr., but the man died after he tried to escape by severing his own foot from leg irons, where he promptly bled to death.
Jesus.
Even though he was never ID'd, we didn't have DNA, we didn't have scientific evidence.
No, we have descriptions.
Yes, even though he was never ID'd, this man's skull was displayed in a Salmon, Idaho saloon depicting him as the murderer Pa Bender.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though we really have absolutely
Souvenirs.
no freaking
We
idea.
know that some prisoner basically chewed his own leg off, ankle off to get out.
Right.
Yeah, his skull was on display for a number of years until it closed down. For years, there were Bender sightings. In 1889, 2 women were arrested in Niles, Michigan.
Oh my gosh.
For larceny.
Really?
One
was beautiful, one was ugly?
Get this. An Elmira Monroe and a Sarah Davis.
Oh.
Now, they were found not guilty of the larceny here in Michigan, but then they were arrested for the Bender murders. Their identities matched a likeness of a tintype photo. Remember the old tintypes from back in the 1800s?
Yeah.
And Sheriff Dick from Osage traveled to Michigan. Mrs. Davis, so remember there's a Sarah Davis and an Elmira Monroe.
Yep.
Mrs. Davis said Mrs. Monroe was Elmira Bender, but that she wasn't Kate. Instead, she was her sister, Sarah. Mrs. Monroe denied all of that and said, no, I'm not a Bender. We're not the Benders. The women were extradited to Kansas.
That's exactly what the Benders would say.
Right. Ultimately, Mrs. Monroe admitted she had married a man named Shearer and had been convicted of manslaughter previously. And that's why she wasn't forthcoming with information, because she was a convicted kind of murderess, right? She was a manslaughter. So
I have killed someone
right.
before.
Well, what was found that if she was in fact married to the Shearer man and living in Michigan, she would have been living here when the Bender murders were committed in 1872.
Oh, okay.
So they found that there was not enough proof to convict the women. I just want to remember that just because you're not guilty doesn't mean that you're innocent.
Right.
If that isn't confusing enough, then there's some evidence that convolutes the entire story of the Bloody Benders, and I'm going to give this to you now.
Okay.
Let's just ask ourselves, who are the Benders? Pa Bender was actually found to have been a man named John Flickinger, who may have committed suicide in Lake Michigan, or may have cut off his own foot.
So they were never the Benders to begin with?
Never.
They were the Flickingers?
No, he was a Flickinger. I'm not done.
They were never a family?
No, they were kind of a family. He and Ma ended up getting married.
This is why Kate was humping her brother. It was her husband, wasn't it?
You fucking got it, man.
Yes.
Okay. So I love when she guesses things early. Like, I'm all excited. I'm sorry I ruined it for the rest of you, but I'm excited. So
oh my God, my mind is blown.
So John Flickinger, Pa Bender, had immigrated from either Germany or Holland.
Okay.
So he's legitimately a German or Dutch immigrant, right? Okay. And would presumably be hard to understand and such. Ma Bender was actually Elmira Mark and was born in the freaking Adirondacks. She's from here. She wasn't even foreign. Totally fake, accent and all.
Okay, I don't hate that.
That
cracks me up.
Right? Well, you are still not going to like her. She's still a nasty woman.
Well, she is, but that's funny.
Well, when she was a teenager, which is typical in that area of the Adirondacks, she married a man named George Griffith.
Okay.
She gave birth to 12 children, including Kate.
God. Okay, so
Kate and she are related.
Okay, Kate really was her daughter.
Yes. Mr. Griffith died suddenly of a bad place in the head, quote unquote, which resembled a hammer-sized dent.
Yeah, bad place in the head, I'd say.
It legitimately says that for like a bad place in the head, like
He's
a soft spot. But it was a hammer.
But it was a skull fracture.
Well,
he's got a bad place in the head.
If that doesn't lend,
that's like heart attack used to be called an everlasting faint.
Right, fantastic. The everlasting faint. Well, Elmira married several more times and was rumored to have killed every single one of those husbands and 3 of her own children so they couldn't testify against her.
This does not surprise me at all.
Nope.
And
she's a murderess.
Let that be a message to all you single ladies out there. If Elmira can continue to get it, so can you.
That's right.
There's
Elmira,
men.
I feel like Elmira is the real murderess here.
Yes.
Like this is her
the brains behind the entire operation.
She's been killing, but she must fall in love then with John Flickinger. She's got her daughter Kate, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Kate in a few as well. But then they somehow end up with John Jr., right? He is not their child.
Yeah.
John Jr. was actually a man named John Gebhardt. And the weird laughing thing that he exhibited was rumored to be an act to disguise his true nature. He was very smart and wanted people to think he was a halfwit. So John and Kate were said to have not been related at all, and in fact sometimes passed as husband and wife. Okay. They had a known sexual relationship, and as I mentioned earlier about Kate's whole free love speeches, I think it was a cover, like it's okay to love and want to have sex with your brother because this guy isn't actually my brother.
In case you ever see me fooking my brother, it's because he's not really my brother.
Husband.
Right, but I just want you guys to know it's okay.
Tales say, you're not going to like this. I don't like this. I wish I could skip over it.
But you can't. You got to give us all the info.
All right. Kate and John had multiple babies. And this is a huge trigger alert, you guys, for infanticide. When she would give birth, they would bash the baby's heads in at birth.
Oh my God. Why? Just why? Because they're supposed to be brother and sister?
I don't know. Or they didn't want the entanglement. They have a thing here.
Yeah.
They kill people, they steal money, they move on, and they enjoy killing. And so
my God.
That was and no, this says when I found this in the citation specifically says it was rumored that they would bash, but that she had multiple pregnancies.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's not exactly birth control.
John Gebhardt was the man found to have died of a stroke at the Texas-New Mexico border.
Okay.
Now, Kate was actually the 5th child of Elmira. Her birth name was Eliza Griffith. After she married, she went by Sarah Eliza Davis. The lady that was
The
found
lady
in Niles.
that was claiming to be her sister.
Sarah Davis is the woman found in Michigan that quote unquote sold out Elmira Monroe.
Yeah.
I think this was Kate and her mom.
I think so too. Most definitely.
Kate was also said, shockingly, to have been actually prostituting herself at the Bender Inn. She was involved in sex work. And I don't think that was a surprise to anybody, but I believe that this was something that Kate was doing consistently with their movement west.
Yes. Also might be probably why she was just getting rid of the pregnancies the way that she was.
Perhaps. So there's a museum still in Cherryville that has what's left of the exhibits from the Bender Inn. Of course, most of it was taken by what I can only call grave robbers, but I mean, they souvenir hunters, right? So we don't know what happened to the Benders. There's all these rumors and all these theories still abound. I want to read a couple things to you. So in my research, and this is from the Bloody Benders, Serial Killers of Kansas, Legends of America. Well, in January of 2011, there was a reader that did this thing called a reader's update, and he calls it Grandpa's Tale of the Bloody Benders, and I'm going to read it verbatim.
Grandpa's Tale.
Yeah.
Sit around,
people,
children.
Can you imagine,
let me tell you a tale.
During the time, people who were living there, this was a big thing.
Yeah.
And how many people had stopped at this inn or knew who they were? Independence, while it wasn't a huge metropolis, was certainly a main place that people would travel to and from.
Certainly.
They were seeing some action.
Yeah.
So the reader says, and this is, I'm going to give you credit, Gabe Gibson from Effingham, Illinois, as told to him by his grandfather, Emerson Smalley. Love it.
Aww.
Last night, I listened to a story from my grandfather, Emerson Smalley, about the Benders and their supposed end. His family was from the Cherryville, Kansas area, and the story involves a group of men that found the Benders and were in a gunfight with them, one of whom was a judge that lost part of his ear in the gun battle.
Oh my gosh.
You knew I had to cover this.
Yes, of course.
My grandfather, who's approaching 80, is always full of great stories, but he assured me that his father, who passed this on to him, knew what really happened. When his father, my great-grandpa, Frank Smalley, was a boy, he was hiding in the hayloft of the family barn, where he overheard a group of men talking below and laughing. Frank's father, Jesse P. Smalley, and several men were joking with a local judge, teasing him about his missing ear. As the boy listened, the men continued to talk, relating the tale of how the judge had lost his ear. It was a story about the infamous Benders and about one man who got away. This unnamed man was one of many who made the mistake of stopping at the Bender Inn. Like others, he was hit over the head as he sat at the table. The Benders then stripped him of his clothes and went to bury him when the man suddenly awoke. Oops! The Benders were undoubtedly surprised to find that the man wasn't dead. Somehow he escaped, appearing naked in the middle of the night at Jesse Smalley's doorstep. Telling the story of his near death, Jesse quickly retold it to a nearby doctor and judge, who formed a vigilante group to go after the Benders. However, by the time the men arrived at the Benders' cabin very early the next morning, they found them gone. They then began to follow a wagon trail left by the Benders that took them down as far as Tulsa, Oklahoma, before circling back into Kansas. At a fork of the Fall and Verdigris rivers, they found the Benders with their wagon backed up against a fallen tree with canvas over it for shelter. When the vigilante group approached, the Benders fired on them, at which time the judge lost part of his ear to a flying bullet.
Okay.
In retaliation, the vigilantes killed all of the members of the Bender family, buried them where they died, and took the wagon to town where they left it. I have heard my grandfather tell this story since I was a boy, and Grandpa swears that this is the real story of what happened to the Benders. Fact or fiction, no one knows. But I've always enjoyed the tale, and I hope you will as well.
Yeah.
A
little boy overhearing conversation.
Well,
I could see that.
And another version of that, though far more well-known. Have you ever heard of Laura Ingalls Wilder and the Little House on the Prairie?
Yes, and it's weird. I just got the chills because at the beginning of this story, when we were talking about all this, I almost said, I'm getting Little House on the Prairie vibes.
Yeah, you should. The Little House on the Prairie books were warm and sugar-coated retellings of life on the West, right?
Yeah.
But in 1937, at a book fair in Detroit, actually, how fun is this? Laura Ingalls Wilder is telling a story to the public. She mentioned stopping at the Benders Inn.
Shut up.
She made a statement that her dad, Pa Ingalls, our Pa, Charles.
Oh my gosh, Charles.
Joined in one of those vigilante hunts for the killers. She remembers that when Pa returned from where he had gone, he said, not to worry, they will never be found.
He was on that trail that went after them.
She continued that the Benders were in fact never found and stated that she had formed her own conclusions why. But whether this is true or an exaggerated memory of a then 4-year-old girl is unknown. We do know that at 4, the Benders were, so Laura Ingalls would have been 4. The Benders were exposed in 1873. Mm-hmm. If we chronicle her life on the prairie and life moving back out west, it was 2 years after the Ingalls family had left the area.
Okay.
So the Ingalls family did live about 20 miles south in Rutland Township. These statements that she made were only ever republished in 1988's A Little House Sampler until it was reproduced into Pioneer Girl. That was the most recent one that came out that Laura Ingalls Wilder's daughter published.
Yes.
So critics believed it to be creepy, cinematic, and likely untrue. Some feel that this was an attempt by Laura Ingalls Wilder to appeal to an adult audience.
Okay.
The Ingalls family historically did leave Kansas and return to Wisconsin long before the discovery of the Benders' Hell's Half Acre. So whether Pa Ingalls ever actually met the Benders during their stay in Independence is maybe sketch at best. But George Lanker did live in Rutland Township in 1870, and he would have been close neighbors with the Ingalls.
Okay. And so maybe he could have riled him up,
So
gathered him up.
Some feel that the memories of the time were simply absorbed into the tale of the Benders.
Okay.
She was 4. She was hearing things, kind of like this kid at the barn. You hear a story told so many times. So some people think publicity stunt by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Others feel that as a 4-year-old hearing this very famous story and knowing that they had been close neighbors and possibly friends with one of the victims, and that Pa had reportedly stopped, and why wouldn't they have? That would have been a spot that they would have stopped at the Benders in.
Right.
That he somehow became involved when he went out one evening with a group to do some vigilante justice.
Sure.
So before we end the tale of the Bloody Benders.
Fascinating.
I want to do something, and we still have plenty of time. So I want to give you a complete accounting of the victims.
Okay,
Make sure we do that on this podcast.
Yeah.
And there are very likely many more that were not found.
I'm sure.
So I'm just going to go through May 1871, Mr. Jones. That was the body that was found in Drum Creek with a crushed skull and the throat cut.
Okay.
February of 1872 were the 2 unidentified men found on the prairie, I believe in the river.
After the snowstorm?
With the skulls crushed and the throats cut. December 1872, Ben Brown. He was the one found with $2,600 missing. He was buried in the apple orchard.
Okay.
All of these are December 1872, by the way. All of the rest of these until I get to the last one. Henry Mackenzie. He had been relocating to Independence from Hamilton County, Indiana. $36 was missing. And a matched team of horses. Johnny Boyle from Howard County, Kansas. He was missing $10. Was $226 now. Had a pacing mare. I don't know, what's a pacing mare? You're a horse person. Is it like a
paces the rest of the horses?
Oh, a pacing mare. Thank you. That was brilliant. Come to Charnell for all your horse needs. $850 in a saddle was missing. He was found in the well. They had thrown him in the well, Bender's well.
The well that they used? Okay, they were cannibals.
George Newton Lonker and his 18-month-old daughter, Mary Ann. Some newspapers, and I'm going to note this now for anybody who wants to tell me I'm inaccurate. Sometimes it's Longcor, Longcor. Sometimes it's Lonker, Loncher. And sometimes Mary Ann is reported as being 18 months old and sometimes 8 years old, which is a huge effing difference.
That is a huge difference.
But I went with the one that I saw the most, and with the neighbor, Mr. York, then went looking, and the things that were published on his gravestone, I figured his and his family's would be the most accurate description. So I say it said 18 months old.
Got you.
Someone were found.
Could have just forgot that 1 in front of the 8
right?
for the 8-year-old.
Correct. Again, she was thought to have been buried alive. He was killed traditionally the same way as the others. No injuries were found on her body. She was fully clothed, including mittens and her hood. They were both found buried together in the apple orchard.
Can we hope that maybe they just suffocated her before they buried her and they just didn't have the ability to determine that at that time?
One account said that they thought she was strangled, but I find that suspect at best because there's ligature marks. Yeah. Even then, people.
They'd see that.
Still December 1872, John Greery. Red Smith, and Abigail Roberts were all found buried in the apple orchard.
They're fertilizing their
December
ground with these
13th through
bodies.
15th. Various body parts. The parts did not belong to any of the other victims found and are believed to belong to at least 3 additional victims. Also, December 1872, these are victims, what they consider 16 through 19. During the search, the bodies of 4 unidentified males were found in Drum Creek and the surrounds. All 4 had crushed skulls and throats cut. One may have been a Jack Boggart, whose horse was purchased from a friend of the Benders after he went missing in 1872, but they couldn't ID him. And then last was Dr. William York, who $2,000 was missing on him, and he was also found buried in the apple orchard. The remains, body parts that were not matched to the bodies found, they believe to be the representation total of more than 20 victims.
Because they were eaten.
Well, the cauldron, the statements made, you and I are warped with the things that we know about the things that we know. And if there's body parts buried, but there's a lot missing, and you have the cauldron and you have the ability to serve it and dispose of it, then of course that's where we're jumping.
Oh, yes.
But let me again preface that there was no confirmation.
Maybe animals ate it.
I don't know. I don't think so.
You know, it's only parts because there's coyotes.
Right. So there we have, in my research, America's first family of serial killers.
Right. But they weren't all really related. Now, were they? They were a pseudo-family.
What makes a family? What makes a family, Charnell?
I am so glad that you did that case. I
am too.
Probably never would have went down the rabbit hole, and I'm just so glad that you did.
Well,
I'm fascinated.
Tie up your apron strings, Alice, because we followed the white rabbit today.
Okay.
We ate the thing that said eat me. We drank the thing that said drink me. And that's where we ended up with the bloody Benders.
Yes.
So,
I love it.
Would you like a little bit of a brain bath? I just
do.
have a couple.
I do.
So as I'm taking a sip here, dumbest criminals. Yeah, I had to leave with some dumbest
I do
criminals.
love it when you bring me a dumb criminal.
Well, these were smart criminals, the Benders, right?
Absolutely.
We don't know if they've ever been caught.
Because really it's still unsolved. Like, we know that there were these 4
It is the largest,
heinous people.
Most famous unsolved case in Kansas, if you look it up.
Yeah, and I understand why. Amazing.
All right. So a nameless thief, I'm assuming nameless because he's embarrassed or too stupid to be published with a name, in Portland, Oregon, executed the almost perfect robbery in 2013. After going through every inch of a house he had broken into, opening every drawer and stealing everything of value he could find without leaving any fingerprints, he got thirsty. He grabbed a container of orange juice he found in the refrigerator, took a gulp directly from it, and left it in the sink.
That's a lot of work.
The container was sent straight to the DNA testing unit at Oregon State Crime Lab, where the forensic scientists found a match, and the thief was caught.
Yep. That'll do it. That's a lot of work. Bring your own water bottle, buddy.
No kidding. Just get a drink when you leave.
I bring my own water bottle to work.
Right.
Why wouldn't he?
Okay. A 10-year-old. Beautiful. A 10-year-old boy was playing with his father's old handcuffs on Father's Day.
Oh?
He cuffed himself to his dad, William Klein Jr., but they lost the key during the game.
Are they fuzzy?
No, this is the father and son, but I venture, I don't think.
Well, I'm just wondering why Dad had them. Was he in law enforcement, or
if they were
they
fuzzy? If they were fuzzy, I don't think they would have needed to call for the assistance that they did, because Mr. Klein, when his son handcuffs him to him, calls the local police in Des Moines, Iowa to help him get the cuffs off.
Sure.
As per routine, the police ran Klein through their database and found 2 arrest warrants outstanding and re-cuffed Klein in front of his kid, but it was for real this time.
No.
Yeah.
Turns out we shouldn't have cut those cuffs off you, buddy.
We could have just left him on.
Oh, shit. Also, does he not know he had warrants out for his
people
arrest?
Don't.
Exactly. I mean, they really don't. Or he thought maybe they wouldn't run him. Because they were coming for such an innocuous thing.
People are investigated for a crime and then it gets set up. They aren't arrested right away. And they never know what came of it.
Yep.
Now, if I had contact with the police,
I'm going to follow up.
I would call and I'm going to follow up. I'm going to be like, was I going to be charged? Do I have a warrant?
Yeah. About that convo we had.
Yeah. Remember
Where do we stand on that?
Remember when I volunteered to come to the sheriff's department to talk to you? Yeah. All right, here's a fun one. Scottish shoplifter Aaron Morrison. Scottish shoplifter Aaron Morrison.
Thank you.
I fucked it up. Might be one of the most stupid thieves in history. Legit.
Okay.
But I dig him. After stealing a bottle of vodka from a liquor store, he stayed there to flirt with the shop clerk.
Oh, boy thinks he's got game.
He even gave her his name and number.
Oh, my guy.
And then it
Who
wasn't
left his real number?
his name and number after he robbed her. And then obviously they traced his whereabouts.
Honey, baby, boo boo pie. You can't know.
The police are like, hi, this is Maggie from the saloon.
Do you
Will you meet me?
Do you remember me from the liquor store? I'd like to cash in on that date now.
So at a bus station in St. Paul, Minnesota, a hot-tempered man named Justin John Boudin was involved in an argument with a woman, and he punched her in the face.
Okay.
He also attacked another person who was standing there, which caused him to drop his folder on the ground, and he didn't retrieve it because he fled. The police officers who arrived at the scene a few minutes later tracked Boudin thanks to what was inside the folder, his anger management homework.
Oh, Jesus. Well, he hadn't done his homework yet, to be fair. He didn't know how to angrily manage that situation any other way.
Nope. It did not go over well.
That's ironic.
And I'm just going to leave you with this one. One of the most ridiculous robberies ever committed took place in Hickory, North Carolina. An unobservant thief invaded Captain's Galley restaurant and picked up the cash register, but didn't notice a little detail: a trail of white cash register tape hanging from the machine. All the police had to do was follow the trail to his apartment.
Shut up.
Of paper, finding him cracking open the register.
My God.
Yeah.
Ever walked out of the bathroom with toilet paper on your foot?
I feel like this is different.
It's kind of like that, except, a crime.
Now, it would be like walking out with it attached to your foot, still attached to the
the
roll. So it keeps on going.
People could just follow it right to your
All I
table.
know is I walked out of Tootsie's and was going down Broad, and the next thing I know, somebody was yelling, "Girl, you got toilet paper on your boot."
Toilet paper. Oh, my God.
Oh, my. So
Well,
there we
thank
go.
you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for that. What a great case. And, man, look at you bringing the hour-and-a-half long case to
Yeah.
us today.
I
Good
decided
work.
that I needed to give you something longer than an hour. My stamina's not what it used to be.
Well, you held up just fine today.
Thank you.
I appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it too.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. Follow us on social media. Send us your message request. No, send us your case request
Send us a friend request.
to crimecurious@yahoo.com. Also, you could email us from our website, crimecuriouspodcast.com.
We will answer.
Yes, we do. And if you want to binge, God, we have hundreds of episodes that you could binge. We give our Patreons a lot of extra content. So go to patreon.com/crimecurious and binge us there and help keep us on air. So, all right, until next time, everybody.
Bye-bye.